Abigail Doolittle is back, as she is every day at this time, for our Options Insight segment. And Abigail, I'm taking a look at a VIX, 24.54 right now. What was it? I think last week we got above 30. We hadn't been there in quite some time, but I think someone you had spoken to on this very program actually said that was going to happen.
Indeed, Romaine. Scott Bauer, Prosper Trading Academy, not only said it was going to go above 30, but Scott told us just a few weeks ago when it was around 20, below 20, that in March the VIX tends to go to 31. That's exactly where it went last week. Let's bring in Scott Bauer, CEO of Prosper Trading Academy. Great to have you with us, Scott, and tremendous call. And I know that was a lot of seasonality, but I think that a lot of your experience and expertise was certainly a piece of that too. So if you were to take a look at your crystal ball now, what do you see next for volatility, the VIX, and why?
You know, let's throw out the banking issue that's going on right now. I do think that after Wednesday, after the Fed announcement, we'll see a lower VIX. If 50 was still on the table, 50 basis point hike, that could change the narrative, but that's off the table right now. 73% probability of a quarter point hike, 27% for zero. So I do think that we're going to see the VIX trend a little bit lower unless we get some more of this banking contagion. And yes, it is a lot of seasonality, Abigail, but you know, when you're standing around the VIX pit all day long and you're talking to those people in there and you're really seeing the order flow back and forth, it gives you a good sense for what's going on.
Well, you know, Romaine brought up an interesting point, which is the idea that right now we're sort of in nowhere land. There isn't really a dominant narrative, so to speak, waiting on the Fed, the next big vol event. And what's interesting, Scott, is if we go into the Bloomberg terminal, we're going to see the correlation, the relationship between the VIX and the spread essentially between the target rate and where Fed fund futures are right now. And what's so interesting is that spread is going in, which should be good for volatility. So you think that after this Fed meeting, we are going to see the VIX go down toward where that spread is, volatility essentially come in?
I do, and I think that, you know, we're going to see a bottom in the VIX around 20. Maybe it breaks through there again to the, you know, high teens, 19 and a half. But I would expect 20, 21 after the Fed announcement, unless we see something further, you know, another domino fall from the banking center, or if Powell happens to blurt out something that maybe they're not done raising, right? Everyone's expecting him to say, okay, we're kind of at the end of this, you know, rise cycle, and we're going to look to watch the data and maybe come back off a little bit. But if he blurts out something hawkish, all bets are off. But I would bet we see 2021.
Well, that's a great point, Scott, because the last time we heard him speak before Congress, that was when the market decided that 50 basis points was appropriate. We had a target rate closer to, I think, 580 or so, the peak in September. Now it's come in. We're looking at lots of cuts later this year, so maybe it does completely reverse. How do you trade this volatility?
So around any big event like this, an unemployment report, even going into a stocks earnings report, I like to sell that volatility going into the big news announcement. So I like to sell premium and then buy something as my hedge a few days out or maybe a week out. And, you know, if we look right now, we're looking at the money SPX implied vol trading 37, 38 for this Wednesday and Thursday. Go out to next Monday, and that's down about 10 points from there. So I like to play those time spreads, calendar spreads, because you know when it comes to implied volatility with options, they always normalize. And after that big event is behind us, that's when you typically see that.
Great perspective as always, and you are now officially a real master of the VIX, even though you were before too. Scott Bauer of Prosper Trading Academy, thanks for joining us for Options Insight today. And from New York, this is Bloomberg.